Snap is a book about a frog exploring the world, but it's essentially really about, even though it's a frog, it's really about, in a way, a child or a creature finding out about the world around them, and I suppose looking for friends and seeing how the little frog engages with the world. So seeking adventure and learning about what happens when the frog taps on something, and whether there's a big snap, and then brave enough to keep going and I suppose find their way in the world. Yes, when I start thinking about ideas for a story, it's usually a collection of ideas that I'm interested in or that make me smile. So I've always loved frogs ever since I was little. We used to find tiny little brown frogs in the garden. I used to hold them and it would jump away, and then I would get a fright but then laugh. And so the idea of trying to find a story for frog, and quite a few years ago when my children were young, we were at the aquarium and there were two toddlers around a circular display with fish and they were both walking around. They didn't know each other, and they were both like putting their head around as getting to know each other. And I was just thinking about that beautiful way children or people go out in the world and come across somebody and develop a relationship or a friendship, even for that brief amount of time. I thought that would be a beautiful thing to explore in the story. And then I was thinking about the idea of that child exploring, and that idea of whether it be, and I thought maybe I could use the frog tapping on the crocodile and then the big snap. It still makes me laugh. So it's really kind of for my own amusement, but I thought I'd show you how I go about bringing some of those ideas together. Let's see if I can share my screen. So I start off thinking about the book in almost like a movie with stills, and this is a storyboard. So I create tiny little thumbnails. So each of those rectangles represent the spreads or the pages of the book, and even though they look like little scribbles, you can see the very rough crocodile snapping, and the owl snipping, and the sleeping like Brolga type creature trying to snap the frog as well, and then ending up with the frog meeting all little friends and then having a sleep at the end. And then I start thinking about how I'll create the story. And I was working a lot with collage, and I wonder whether I'd do paper cuts, but in the end I leant away from that and went back to creating the frogs in watercolor. I'm smiling because I drew literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of frogs. And I didn't end up using this watercolor style. I simplified it down, but by the time I drew those hundreds of frogs, I feel like I know frog very well and how frog would respond in different situations, and how frog sits, how frog leaps around, how frog peeps around the corner. And you can see hopefully the personality coming out in these, but then I simplified it back down, and you can see some of the exploration starting off on the top left down to the top right. And these are some of the roughs. Sometimes it's a challenge to bring the energy from the thumbnails into the story, and it's a matter of going back and forth. But it's really thinking about the words and making sure what's the word, the pictures are not just echoing the words, that the words and the pictures form a very much a strong partnership, so that one is almost weaker without the other, so that what you're hearing quack, 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 but you're feeling for the frog as frog tries to get away. So the idea is that the words, the pictures enrich the words or add a depth, I suppose. And this is, you can see some of the painting that goes into the painting the ducks, and then they're scanned and layered together. But I think the simplification of the frog allowed those us to focus on Frog's movement rather than the delicacy of the watercolor. Oh, and during this time, I'm looking at a lot of reference, and I looked at John Olsen's beautiful kind of very free work. So you can see echoes of that in the way the bird is standing with holding on to Frog, even though obviously my bird doesn't look like John Olsen's, but yeah, that's I go to a lot of exhibitions and look at things. And I really love printmaking. So it was important to me in a children's book to bring those that handcrafted and have the textures, because I think that adds to the world with the color palette. So I used a technique called monoprinting, which was really fun to do. So I'm using really thick inky paint, painting onto plastic like a perspex, and then you can see that. And then after that, I would press paper down and peel it off. So you can see the paper's pressed down and it's rubbed on with a baron and then peeled off, so you get the imprint of the feathers, and then they're used. It's very subtle, but those white feathers, they're scanned in and then made white and overlaid over the watercolor. So each illustration has quite a bit of time that goes into it to create the textures and movement. You can see the early rough there of the frog peeping along, and then adding the color and the owl who was asleep waking up. And the end papers are always really important to me too. Every part of the book is a chance to tell another part of the story, or so that it's, I mean, I see children's books as an art form in themselves, and to introduce the story with the frog by itself, and then the end papers at the end have all the little frogs around, I thought was a really lovely finishing off. And this is some of the layering that happens in Photoshop, using all those collage pieces and monoprints and to create the end. And there are lots of little frogs. And sometimes I create animations as well, just once again for my own amusement, as well as making them out of 3D. I'm really passionate about children making things. So some kids have sent me some gorgeous dioramas and things that they've made inspired by Frog as well. Oh, there's Frog coming with me to make the stop motion. I worked with Isabel Knowles, and I'll just show you. Oh, we move Frog so that I'll just show you how that ended up. It's really fun creating the whole world. There was one more. Look out, Frog. Yeah. Oh, there's actually the last one. I can't remember what was yours. And their activities as well. I think when I'm creating the book, it's as if I don't really think about the end product. It's almost thinking about me as a child, or that I find the child in me very easy to to access. So I suppose I just hope if it brings me joy, or I'm really engaged with the character, I hope that the reader will feel the same way. And sometimes it does seem, well, I suppose it's if you go into a book, it is important to be engaged with the characters, but you're thinking about it in hindsight. Yeah, I suppose I'm hoping that they'll see the details, whether it be the expression on the ladybug or the bee, or discover things in that world that they might connect with, or an experience, and even the sounds. And when you think about like the rain pattering on the roof, that's often a sound that people relate to, that drip, drop, drip. And so to bring those everyday moments into a story, I thought was a lovely way of celebrating those everyday moments that, even though they're tiny moments, can almost be a distilled, what am I trying to say? So, sometimes we see brave moments as being big. They went out and they did this and that was brave and they worked hard. But bravery can be found in those really small moments is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Of pushing yourself or going for a walk to a place you haven't been before, or saying hello to someone, or introducing yourself to someone you haven't met before. Sometimes that can make a big difference.
It really does make me think about the book so differently. I think I've really looked at it through this educator lens of how can I pull this apart and use it for skill development in the classroom. But it's that lovely reminder that, it's not always about the skill development. It's actually about what children take away from that reading experience. And if that message is around finding the bravery in little moments, or being curious, or exploring your surroundings, not to forget to take that away as that message as well when we're reading it with the children, not to get sort of too focused on all the literacy skill development that we can see it lends itself to so beautifully, but just to remember, actually, this is a story that someone's written about something that's personal to them, and that needs to come through in the way that we deliver that as well. I think, first of all, I want to say, I think we're so thankful for authors and illustrators like Anna, all the ones that have come before Anna, and all the future authors and illustrators in our classrooms at the moment, because they help us bring that daily magic. They're that beating pulse of our classrooms through quality text, and we're so grateful that we have those as a resource in the classroom every day. And, picture books are one of those beautiful tools that we can use for skill development, and they're so versatile and can be used for so many things. In terms of English and literacy skills, I think the starting point for us is oral language. Picture books are such beautiful conversation pieces. They can elicit such beautiful classroom talk and can get kids talking about so many wonderful things, whether it's that foundational oral language skill from, sequencing events and retelling stories, through to making predictions. What do you think might happen next? Where is Frog going? To things like inferring meaning and making those lovely connections between their own lives and their own experiences. And then as students get older, making those intertextual connections through other texts that they know or have read, and connecting to their global community and the world around them, and just having those really rich conversations that can be sort of fostered and ignited by good picture books is just so important. And then, from that beautiful, rich dialogue comes vocabulary development. It's just such a wonderful opportunity to unpack some of those word choices that authors make. And we talk about how every word counts and every word makes a special meaning, and to be able to unpack those choices and develop that vocabulary in our students is so important as well. We can move from the word level to the sentence level. We can explore and use quality picture books as models for different clause structures and sentence structures in the classroom, and how authors connect those to making meaning in the text, and students can use those models sort of in their own writing and innovating on text and becoming authors themselves with really strong models for what's happening at that sentence level. And then, of course, we've got reading skills, which we can't leave out. Things like developing phonics and phonological awareness through quality texts, which is really important for us to keep bringing the reading skills into the classroom through quality literature, exploring things like onset and rhyme, repetition, fluency, developing expression and prosody. All of those things come through that beautiful experience of a shared text that's read aloud in the classroom. And then, of course, it's picture books. So we can't leave out, those beautiful images, using picture books as a multimodal resource in the classroom, and how text can make meaning without using any language at all, which is just so extraordinary. And, how to understand how to make meaning from the pictures, and unpacking that beautiful interplay, and how text and image work together. And I know, Anna, you touched on that, the text and the image are sort of codependent on each other, which they are so much in this book, and helping students to understand how that's achieved and how important that is for the meaning of the text. So, I just think, as I said, we're so lucky that people take the time to make picture books, because they're just such an incredible resource in the classroom. I think the first standout for us as educators would be the obvious one, which is exploring onomatopoeia and that beautiful, the sounds that those beautiful words make. And it's just such a beautiful text for the listener to hear read out loud. And we know that onomatopoeia for students is it's so helpful for language development for young children, because so much meaning is held and captured in the sounds that those words actually make. And like that word like drip, like you can literally hear that bead of water rolling off the leaf and sort of landing on the ground below, and it just creates this visual accompaniment, or this kind of oral accompaniment to the meaning of that word. And for students to engage with that and to help them to develop that understanding of words and what they mean through onomatopoeia is just, as well as being a delight to hear, it's a great educational tool as well. And it's so engaging for kids to listen to in the text read out loud. And then I think in this book in particular, you've got exploring visual image. You've got all these really lovely vectors. There's so much movement happening. It's just the pages just come alive, and your eye is being drawn sort of all over the page, sort of left to right and up and down. And everywhere this frog moves, our eyes travel with them. And that's done sort of through that use of vector in the artwork, and sort of making us sort of follow that journey through the book. And then you've got the sort of the directional text, which also acts as a vector in itself and sort of draws your eye down, and it adds so much meaning as well. The way that word drip on, I think, the first page, it drips off the leaf, like it's almost text as image. They're not. I wouldn't even say they're codependent. I looked at it as they're not any different from each other. The text and the image is just all one piece that just works seamlessly together. And it supports so much meaning, and especially for our EALD students to see, to hear the sound of that word drip, and then to see it literally dripping off the leaf. It helps them to really get that meaning out of that vocabulary, which some of our students really need as a support in the classroom. Another feature that stood out for me was the word choice, and how it can be used to support phonics and phonological awareness in the book. I mean, the beautiful thing about every single word in that book is they can be decoded and read phonetically. So for our learners who are learning to decode first, either with beginning code or extended code, they can access all of that depending on which sounds that they've learned, which we think is just fantastic. And it's got something, for our entry-level learners, like CVC words like tip and tap, and right down to some more complex words with extended code, like sort of sneak. You've got that vowel digraph in there, or snack. You've got the CK after the short vowel sound. So you've got lots of little things there that you could do with onset and rhyme. Sort of drip to drop, and the difference sort of there. So yeah, a lot of stuff happening. Some initial phoneme substitution, sort of bump to jump. But then you've got, words like splish and splash. You've got that trigraph of the SPL, and then you've got the substitution of the middle phoneme, the vowel sound in the middle, from splish to splash. So there's so much happening there from a phonics point of view. I don't know, Anna, if you thought about that when you were writing the book, but it's for us teaching children to decode and to segment and blend. It's such a beautiful text for that, to do that in a really engaging way. And then I think, going back to the images again, another feature that stood out for me was that beautiful use of the frog's eyes for sort of offer and demand. And I mean, it's not really, I don't think or maybe one time I think the frog looks at us, but mostly it's just all offer, and you use the gaze of the frog so beautifully to sort of to take our eyes to all the different things that are happening. And I think that's just another, a really beautiful feature that I would draw the students' attention to as well. And I think the fact that he never really looks at us, he's so blissfully, or she, gendering the frog, it's so blissfully unaware that there's someone even watching. And then you get that joyfulness that comes from not knowing that you're being observed, and just totally free, thinking that no one's watching what you're doing, and that, that little joyful, excited, happy dance that the frog does
Yeah.
at the end is just, we just love it. It's exuberant. It's just so fun. There's so much that we would unpack there. That's just a couple. I could go on and on, but that's just a few standouts for us.
It's amazing. It's almost as when you finish a story, it becomes almost like a separate thing. So I can hear those. I feel so happy for Frog. It feels like separate from me. The book almost. It's funny because you think, oh, I hope it's okay in the world out there, almost like a child. And I think, well, Frog doesn't mind. Frog is okay. Like, so I don't need to worry. But I feel, touched by those words and delighted kind of for Frog in a way. Yeah.
I started to talk in the previous question about the fantastic opportunities that this book affords us for teaching phonics and, helping students to decode and segment and blend in the classroom. And there's a lot out there around explicit reading instruction at the moment, and to have an opportunity to teach phonics and phonological awareness explicitly, but through such a beautiful, beautiful text, I think is a real treat for us in the classroom. So definitely there'd be a heavy phonics approach, looking at beginning code and extended code. And, for me, because the book has so much movement, I'd want to bring that movement into the classroom. So I could see, blowing up those words or having them printed out on card and actually having them cut into the different phonemes and having students actually move around the room, to actually rearrange those words and make those different sounds. Let's shuffle apart. Okay, you shuffle in here. Let's take the it out of drip and let's put the o in. Now we've got drop, and actually, showing how words are just sounds that we've moved around into different places, and taking that lovely movement from the book and putting that into their learning by actually moving sounds around physically in the classroom, I think would just be so much fun for the kids to engage with. They could even hop like the frog, as they're moving around, and oh, look out, here's this sound or that sound. And I think that would be something straight away that I would think to do, because it's fun and it's also explicit phonics instruction as well through a great text, which we're ticking a lot of boxes there for our students. What else did I think of? Using this text as a repeated reading and fluency tool. So one of the things that we know our students often struggle with is developing that fluency and expression and being able to decode and blend back together really quickly and efficiently. And sometimes when we do repeated reading of text, it can be very, very dry, but I couldn't imagine a student not wanting to read this text again and again and again, just because it is so fun. So definitely we would use that as a fluency tool, and I just couldn't go past an opportunity to build some readers' theatre into the classroom, into this text. I could just imagine, each of the students having their section and then sort of going through sort of down the line as all the kids are reading out their different parts and building in that fluency and that expression and that prosody, and just experimenting with how could you read this word and what could it sound like, and how do other children interpret the sound that word makes, and how do they choose to read it, and just sort of just going through and doing that repeated reading through readers' theatre and bringing that dramatic play and movement into that as they do it, I think would just be so special. And then because we've got that beautiful onomatopoeia, I would love to bring in some soundscape work into the classroom to really explore the sounds that those words make in a really musical way. I think could be a really lovely blend of literacy and music too. I think getting those different instruments out and just how do you interpret the sound that a drip makes or a splash makes, and how could you create that musically, and then sort of actually playing the book, but playing it sonically rather than actually reading out loud, I think would be really nice. And then I'd love to see students just writing these different words, so practicing their encoding, doing their sounding out and writing it down. But what did I say here? Oh, and playing with that directionality of text, you know, so I could see giving students a task where, you know, they have to choose one of the words, like could be like jump, for example, and they had to create an image that really showed the meaning of jump through their own illustration, and then experimenting with how could you play with text direction to really give that emphasis and create that vector of, you know, someone jumping. So they're doing their spelling practice, they're practicing their encoding, but through a really meaning-based sort of task where they're showing that they've understood the meaning of that word, and then they're playing with text direction, just like a real author illustrator has. And that's what we want our students to do, is to mimic some of the best, so that they feel like real authors and they feel like real illustrators and think that they could go on, you know, and be something like that one day too. And that's that joy and that magic that we want to bring into the classroom, while still developing all of those foundational literacy skills as well. So, you know, look, there's just, you could do this book for weeks and weeks and weeks. There's so many wonderful things we could do with that in the classroom. But that's just a couple of ideas that we sort of just thought of to do just initially. Yeah.